Switching from clicking to collision. So, the first thing is the enemy does not need to register click handler anymore. It's not going to register the mouse down, so I can highlight that line of code and delete it, or I could just comment it out. Now, one thing, if I comment it out like this, the very last line inside a if statement inside a function, Flash has issues with that. I've been struggling with this and finally figured out that it's that type of comment at that point in the code makes Flash grumpy. Because if I comment this out and auto-format my code, you will notice that suddenly it got all wonky. It now, as far as Flash is concerned, has an error message. So it's this comment here. Let me undo that. That comment in my if statement here at the end caused issues. Now, if that comment is one line sooner, it has no problem with it. But when I have inside a function, inside a conditional, if the comment is the last line in that conditional, it freaks out. Don't know why. And earlier in the semester, I was working on a project that it kept screwing up, and I finally deleted the comment. I wanted it there, but I deleted it because I could not get my code to work with that comment there. It's like, what is wrong? And tonight, or this afternoon, I finally figured out it's the comment in a conditional inside a function. So it's the last thing it hits before it closes out that conditional. It freaks out. If you switch it to the other type of comment, so the block comment instead of line comment, it doesn't freak out. I don't know why. It makes no sense. A comment is a comment. But apparently, it does matter a little bit where those comments appear. So that was something I figured out this afternoon. So I can comment this out because we don't need the click handler anymore. We need some of its guts, but we don't actually need the click handler. So then, what we can do is we can just simply change things around a little bit. Now, I can take that functionality of collisions and put it into enemy loop, because I can say enemy loop, hey, if you collide with the player, then blah, 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 blah. And I can do that. Or, and this is what I prefer to do, the same way that I said create enemy, I created my own function. I can do that for check collisions. So what you're going to find as you start doing coding is you start taking pieces of instructions or logic and putting them into their own function. So a function, instead of checking this, doing this, doing this, doing this, all these different things to different objects, the function is kind of single purpose. Now, one function might call a bunch of other functions, because currently player loop calls create enemy. Because we could have put inside player loop, I could have put all of this code inside player loop instead of putting it in its own function. But I think having create enemy in its own function makes it easier to find. Check collisions, check boundaries, update score, start game, end game. All of these things start to lend themselves to fitting into their own function, so that within that function it just kind of does one thing. And then we just call those functions when we need them. And then when we want to organize our code to create a more complex project, so you have a start page, you have an instructions part, you have a gameplay, you have game over, you have level up, you have all these different phases or states. It's really easy to then pick and choose the functions you want to call at any given point. But if everything is all convoluted into one massive long function, it gets to be really hard to then build those different stages or states of your project. So we move the enemy. Enemy checks to see if It ran off the screen. And then what we could say is check collisions. And I'm going to transform click handler into check collisions. As I said, we're obliterating the previous. Now I could have deleted and then retyped all of this, but I don't really need to. Not really. When a function is called directly, but not from an event listener, then its parameters inside the parentheses are typically empty. So enemy loop is called by this event listener. Therefore, we say e:event. Event here matches the event up here. Previously, under click handler, it said e:"mouse event because it said mouse event in here. But now this is called directly, not from an event. Therefore, it does not have any parameters. So when I collide, my score goes up by 1. We're going to tell that object to stop running enemy loop. We don't need to remove click handler because that's not on it anymore, so I can just delete that. We can tell it to play, and we can tell it to start exploding. So now, all of these things happen every frame. Now we need to wrap that inside a conditional that says, hey, only do these things if we actually hit the player. So now it's going to be if oh, shoot. I changed this from my initial starting thing. We're going to have to pass a value into it. Shoot. We are not going to call check collisions after going on for 3 minutes about doing it that way. I'm going to do it differently then. We'll come back to that thought a little bit later, because that requires me to do one more thing that I don't want to do yet this evening. So I'm just going to, actually, I don't even need that then. So if e.target, which is the enemy, hit test object player, so I'm just leaving that as a comment. So check for collisions there. So in enemy loop, it moves it, checks to see if it ran off screen. Then it checks to see, has it run into the player? If so, score goes up, stops moving, starts exploding, registers explode loop plays out. So now theoretically, if all goes well, you should explode when they run into the player. And we can see it does indeed work.